cold, silent, unforgiving. Deep in the snow-covered wilderness of Minnesota, a young hunter sets out alone, expecting nothing more than a quiet morning in the woods. But in the blink of an eye, his world turns into a nightmare. A powerful force slams into his back, sending him sprawling into the snow. His rifle flies from his hands, and as he scrambles to his feet, he locks eyes with a predator unlike any he's ever faced. A timber wolf, yellow eyes, bared teeth, inches from his throat. For 19-year-old Ron Poyirier, this was no ghost story, no legend told around a crackling campfire. This was real, and it nearly cost him his life. What happens when one of nature's most elusive predators decides to strike? How did Ron survive when the odds were stacked against him? And was this truly an attack, or something even more terrifying? Stay with me as we unravel one of the most chilling wildlife encounters ever recorded. Welcome to Savage Tales, Animal Encounters. Hey there, wild ones. You've just stepped into Savage Tales, Animal Encounters, the ultimate destination for heart-pounding real-life encounters between humans and nature's most formidable beasts. From terrifying predator attacks to unbelievable survival stories, we bring you the raw, unfiltered truth about what happens when man and wild collide. Here we go beyond the headlines. We dive deep into the details, the fear, the instincts, the split-second decisions that mean the difference between life and death. Every week we bring you a new pulse-racing tale, packed with gripping storytelling, jaw-dropping visuals and expert insights into the wild world of animal behavior. If you love the thrill of the wild and the adrenaline rush of survival stories, then make sure to hit that like button. It lets us know you want more. But don't stop there. Subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell so you never miss a single upload. Trust me, you don't want to be the last to hear about these insane encounters. Got your own wild story? Drop a comment below. Whether you've come face to face with a predator or just have thoughts on today's story, I want to hear from you. And of course, share this video with your fellow wildlife enthusiasts, hunters, hikers, anyone who loves a good survival story. The more people who join the Savage Tales pack, the bigger and better our community becomes. Now, buckle up, because this is one savage tale you won't forget. Survival isn't guaranteed, but the story, that lasts forever. It was the dead of winter in northern Minnesota, the kind of cold that stiffens your fingers the moment you step outside. 19-year-old Ron Poyirier had spent countless days in these woods, navigating the thick forests near Sullivan Lake. But this day would be unlike any other. The morning was eerily quiet as he stepped out of the warm hunting cabin, careful not to wake his still sleeping companions. The only sounds were the distant groans of the frozen lake and the whisper of snowflakes drifting through the air. Bundled in his worn hunting clothes, Ron loaded his Glenfield automatic .22, determined to bring back a few snowshoe rabbits for supper. With each step into the wilderness, the soft, powdery snow muffled his movements, allowing him to move silently through the dense pines and firs. Ron had always prided himself on his ability to stalk undetected, slipping between trees like a shadow. But today, the woods felt different. The usual signs of rabbit activity were scarce. Tracks in the snow were few and old, a sign that game was either in hiding or had moved on. As he pressed deeper into unfamiliar terrain, he noticed fresh deer tracks crisscrossing the snow, some of them normal, others showing signs of sudden movement, almost panicked. Some deer had burst through clusters of balsam fir, knocking snow off the branches in their frantic escape. Ron paused, scanning the towering white and red pines above him. The wind had picked up slightly, rustling the snow-laden boughs and sending a chill down his spine. The deeper he went, the denser the forest became, with thick underbrush and young balsam firs, reducing visibility to only a few feet in some areas. As he navigated a small rise, he took a moment to get his bearings. By his estimate, he was about a mile north of the cabin, though his wandering route had likely doubled that distance. The sun was barely visible through the overcast sky, casting an eerie bluish light over the endless white landscape. He knew he could retrace his steps, but for now the hunt continued. Then something caught his attention, a dense thicket of balsam trees up ahead. It was the perfect hiding spot for a rabbit. Moving with practiced precision, Ron approached, every sense alert. His breath came in quiet, measured puffs, and his gloved fingers tightened around his rifle. Suddenly, movement. 50 feet ahead, a flash of motion darted through the trees. His heart pounded. Was it a rabbit? A deer? He couldn't be sure. Carefully, he crept forward, placing each step deliberately to avoid crunching the snow. He stopped behind a small balsam, using it for cover, his instincts screaming for him to wait and observe. The forest held its breath. The next few seconds would change everything. Without warning, something massive slammed into his back. A crushing weight smashed into Ron Poyirier's back with brutal force, driving him face first into the deep snow. The impact sent shockwaves through his body, knocking the wind from his lungs and sending his Glenfield .22 spinning from his grasp. For a split second, his dazed mind refused to accept what was happening. Had one of his friends followed him, tackling him as a prank? But that thought was shattered in an instant as a guttural growl vibrated through his chest. His body twisted instinctively, rolling onto his back just as a massive form loomed over him. He barely had time to register what he was seeing, a grey wolf, its thick winter coat dusted with snow, standing atop him. But it wasn't just standing, it was pinning him. The animal's snarling maw was only inches from his face, its hot breath curling in the freezing air, its piercing yellow eyes locked onto his. A second later, the wolf lunged, snapping its powerful jaws at his throat. Ron's survival instincts kicked in. He threw up his right arm just in time, shielding his neck as the wolf's teeth sank into the fabric of his hunting jacket, tearing through cloth and grazing the skin beneath. Pain flared in his arm, but he barely noticed. It was nothing compared to the overwhelming realization that he was fighting for his life. Kicking wildly, he drove his left knee upward, striking the wolf's underbelly. It wasn't enough to throw the predator off, but it startled the beast just enough to loosen its grip. Seizing the moment, Ron twisted violently, one hand grasping the wolf's thick fur while the other frantically searched for his lost rifle. But the snow had swallowed it. His fingers found only ice and powder as he struggled beneath the weight of the predator. The wolf snapped again, this time at his face. He barely managed to yank his head to the side as razor-sharp fangs grazed his cheek, leaving a burning scratch in their wake. The growling was deafening, a terrifying mixture of aggression and primal dominance. The sheer power of the animal was staggering. It was far stronger than Ron had imagined a wolf could be. His mind raced. Could he gouge its eyes? Could he get to his knife? His knife! It was still sheathed at his hip, but pinned as he was, reaching it seemed impossible. His heart pounded in his ears, drowning out everything else. His arms trembled with effort as he fought to keep the wolf's jaws away from his throat. Every muscle screamed in protest, but adrenaline kept him moving, kept him fighting. Then, a miracle. His groping left hand found something solid beneath the snow. His rifle. Gripping it desperately, he yanked it free and did the only thing he could. He pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, deafening in the stillness of the forest. The wolf's ears flattened against its skull, its eyes flashing with sudden uncertainty. The bullet hadn't hit, he was sure of that. But the sound alone was enough. In a blur of motion, the wolf sprang backward, its body tensed, ready to lunge again. Ron scrambled to his feet, rifle shaking in his grip. His breath came in ragged gasps as he stared down the animal that had nearly ended him. For a moment, predator and prey locked eyes. Then, just as suddenly as it had attacked, the wolf turned and melted into the trees, its grey form vanishing against the snow-dappled landscape. Ron stood frozen, rifle still raised, his body trembling from cold and fear. Was it gone? Would it come back? Every snapping twig, every gust of wind sent his nerves into overdrive. He turned in a slow circle, scanning the dense forest for any sign of movement. Nothing. The attack was over. But the terror still clung to him like ice in his veins. The journey back to the cabin was agonizingly slow. Every few steps Ron turned to check behind him, convinced the wolf was still out there, watching, waiting. His hand remained locked around the rifle's grip, finger hovering near the trigger. He had never felt so vulnerable, so exposed. Fear gnawed at him with every crunch of snow beneath his boots. He no longer moved with the careful, practiced steps of a seasoned woodsman. Now he was driven by raw instinct. Get back, get safe, get away. His wounds stung, but they were nothing compared to the mental shock of what had just happened. His torn hunting jacket flapped in the wind, the deep scratch on his face burned in the cold, and his thigh ached where something, claws, teeth, had ripped his jeans. By the time he reached the clearing near the cabin, his legs felt like lead. He had barely taken a step onto the porch when the door swung open. His friend stood there, eyes widening at his appearance, snow-covered, pale as death, eyes wild with lingering terror. "What the hell happened to you?" someone asked. Ron didn't answer right away. He couldn't. His body was still vibrating with adrenaline, his mind still replaying the moment he had looked into those glowing yellow eyes. Finally he managed to whisper, "I was attacked by a wolf." Silence. Disbelief flickered across their faces. One of them, Walt Fish, an experienced trapper, narrowed his eyes. "You sure?" he asked. Ron didn't get angry. He didn't argue. He simply unzipped his jacket, revealing the fresh tear in the fabric, the faint red scratches beneath. Then, without warning, his composure cracked. His breath hitched, his shoulders trembled, and before he could stop it, the fear, the relief, the shock, all of it came crashing down. He collapsed onto a nearby chair, head in his hands, and for the first time since he was a child, he cried. His friends, now realizing the truth of his ordeal, were no longer skeptical. They listened in solemn silence as Ron recounted every harrowing second of the attack. They inspected his wounds, murmured among themselves, and did their best to comfort him. It wasn't until the early hours of the morning that Ron finally drifted into an uneasy sleep. But even in his dreams, the wolf was there, those yellow eyes watching from the darkness, waiting for another chance to strike. The next day, as the sun rose over the frozen Minnesota wilderness, Ron was left with questions that would never be fully answered. Had the wolf mistaken him for prey? Had it been desperate, starving, willing to take the risk of attacking a human? Or had he simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time? 2 days later, game officials visited the site hoping to find tracks or clues. But a fresh snowfall had erased all traces of the attack, leaving behind only Ron's memory of those terrifying moments. One thing was certain. Ron Poyirier had survived a rare and savage encounter, and he would never set foot in those woods the same way again. That's the story of Ron Poyirier's terrifying encounter with a predator most of us will only ever see from a distance. A moment of pure survival instinct, a battle between man and beast in the unforgiving wilderness. But now I want to hear from you. What would you have done in his situation? Have you ever had a close call with a wild animal? Drop your stories in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more heart-pounding real-life animal encounters, do me a favor, hit that like button. It helps us out more than you know and tells us you want more stories just like this one. And if you haven't already, what are you waiting for? Subscribe to Savage Tales, Animal Encounters, so you never miss a single wild story. We're bringing you the most intense real-life encounters with nature's most dangerous creatures. And trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Make sure you ring that notification bell so YouTube actually lets you know when we drop our next savage tale. Because let's be honest, what's the point of subscribing if you never see our videos? And one last thing, if you know someone who loves intense survival stories, send this video their way. Share it with your friends, your family, or anyone who loves the wild side of nature. Thanks for watching, and remember, in the wild, you are never the only predator. Stay safe, stay aware, and I'll see you next time on Savage Tales, Animal Encounters.